Yesterday we talked about how I sequence my meals in order to help keep my glucose relatively stable during meals, especially restaurant meals, party meals, and meals where I don't really control the menu. Now, why does it work? That's what we're going to cover today. Being able to accept any social eating invitation without concern or worry is just a huge win for me. And I've been able to do that pretty much throughout the last four and a half months since I started this metabolic reset. And yesterday I explained how I sequence my meals so that I start with proteins and then move to fat and fiber. I forgot to mention that, acids, things like fermented foods or pickles and stuff, that also is very useful to add in a little bit. And I'm not talking about big bowls full here. I'm talking about the first few bites of a meal. Before I began this metabolic reset under the guidance of artificial intelligence, I ate exactly the opposite way. My body was in a state of dysregulation because my fasting glucose was high. I was in diabetic range. I had high blood pressure. Everything was out of whack. And so under those conditions, it was really hard for me to feel satisfied, to feel full, to feel the calmness that comes with satiety. And so the way I would eat my meals is starting with the carbs. Often I would begin my meal before sitting down for the meal with carbs, crackers, potato chips, cookies. I mean, not good. Once I started this process, part of the system, part of the set of rules that ChatGPT created for me was to sequence my meals. And the reason that this has been so helpful is because I've discovered that when I begin my meals with protein and then add some fat and some fiber and maybe some acid or some fermented foods before integrating some carbs, this has been allowing my body to eat until I'm not hungry anymore. And I think, that this is really sort of the big discovery for me. First, I had to get my glucose levels down into normal range, because as long as that doesn't happen, it's really hard to reach satiety, just physiologically. So that was the first step. But as soon as that happened, I started to notice very quickly, within the first week or two, that by sequencing my meals like that, suddenly I would eat a meal and I thought, oh my goodness, that's such a small meal. How can that possibly hold me until the next time that I eat? But because the composition was so radically different, my carb intake and my protein intake, the percentages were practically flipped. I went from 65% carbs to probably 50% protein and maybe 15% carbs in my diet. And this, together with a stable glucose, totally flipped the script, because now I could eat a reasonably sized meal in one sitting with a clear beginning and end and feel like I didn't want to eat anymore and continue to my day until the next meal without having to think about food or feeling hungry most days. So this composition of my overall diet and the percentage of protein, fat, fibers, and carbs and the change there have just been huge. It's just fundamental to my ability to reach satiety at the end of practically every single meal that I eat these days. And that ties into what I'd like to discuss tomorrow, which is how was I able to stop grazing and snacking all day? In the meantime, if somebody asked me, hey, Gerard, what's the one thing that I could do to improve my metabolic health? My answer would be walk after every meal for 10 minutes. Try it for a week, 2 weeks, and see how you feel.